Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for tuning in for this Wednesday afternoon news and politics show. We'd like to welcome in University of Virginia Professor of Political Science, Jennifer Lawless. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, how are you?
We are well, and I'm so glad that we switched from Tuesday to Wednesday because so much now to talk about with developments in the last 24 hours. I so wanted to start with breaking down the State of the Union, but seeing as you are in Virginia, which is, I believe, ground zero for the political hotbed of all issues right now, just today, now the Attorney General, Mark Herring, has admitted to wearing blackface in his past, following, of course, Governor Northam. Lieutenant Governor is facing his own issues as well. What's in the water in Virginia?
I think there's a general state of uncertainty and also quite a bit of disgust for a couple of reasons. The first is that if Ralph Northam would have come forward about what he had done at any point before Friday, if when Charlottesville happened a year and a half ago, he would have said that in his younger days he had done things he wasn't proud of, if he had said that people could change, I don't think it would have left everybody feeling the way that they did. And then when he had this tone-deaf press conference, it made things worse. The only saving grace was this general sense that Justin Fairfax, Lieutenant Governor, could rise to the occasion. The problem, of course, is now he's been accused of sexual assault, and the Attorney General, who's third in line, admits that he too wore blackface in the 1980s. So there's a general sense that there's complete chaos. The Constitution is vague as to the transition of power and who's next in line. But frankly, given this crop of characters, I think it's now even more unlikely that Northam will resign.
Now, why do you say it's even more unlikely? Because, again, just the chaos and the lack of, as you said, constitutional directive. I mean, how much does this remain a distraction? Let's start at the top, obviously, with the governor. Of course, here we are on Wednesday. It's been several days now. You mentioned the press conference, the debacle of a press conference on Friday. Let's just go back to the contents, though, of that press conference. Of course, folks are still parsing. He apparently told a number of individuals that he was in the picture, then said he wasn't in the picture, and then, of course, had to ask his wife who he had worn as blackface.
Right.
Could the press conference have gone any worse?
No, and it couldn't have gone worse for a few reasons. First, he came across as a bumbling fool, like he didn't even know why he was there or what the goal was. But second, he was completely oblivious to how racist the press conference came off. Right? Not only did he assure people that he wasn't in the photo because he remembers being in blackface a different time that year, but he also made references to how shoe polish isn't easy to get off and how he still could moonwalk. If his wife didn't stop him, it's likely that he would have actually done it right there and then. And so he just didn't seem to grasp the gravity of the situation. He actually made a statement that it wasn't until 2017 when he was driving around running for governor with a friend of his who happened to be black, he learned how awful dressing in blackface really was. So it demonstrated that he hadn't really evolved. But frankly, as awful as it is, being racist is not illegal at this point. And what the lieutenant governor is now being accused of and sexual assault allegations, that is. And so I think that the appeal of the lieutenant governor is no longer there. And if you've got a governor who dressed in blackface and an attorney general who dressed in blackface, it's unclear that one is worse than the other. So, ironically, I think Ralph Northam's political career, while over, is certainly not one that's going to end today or tomorrow or the next day. He probably will be able to keep this position.
Do you foresee, though, continuing to be a distraction for his leadership? I mean, let's be honest, a number of individuals around the country in the Democratic Party were calling for his resignation. We've seen leaders in the Virginia legislature as well pressing back against him. How is he going to be able to lead when this still hangs over his head and you have so many people who aren't changing their positions? I mean, he said, I'm staying. Is it just a war of attrition and just trying to wait things out?
I think that's exactly what it is. Nobody has recanted their call for him to step down. Virtually every high-ranking Democrat across the country and in Virginia has called for the resignation. The Virginia Black Caucus has called for the resignation. The only person as of right now who's still silent, I think, is Barack Obama. And so, this is one of those situations where I think the pressure is still there to step down. He doesn't want to do it, and there's no obvious, easy successor at this point. And the longer he doesn't step down and the more business needs to get done, the more likely it is that the legislature will just sort of try to continue to work with him and know that he's term limited. It's not like he can seek re-election. He does still have several years left, though.
So let's talk a little bit about the national picture, because, of course, we saw the Republican Florida Secretary of State immediately say, I'm out. The Democratic Virginia governor dig his heels in as well. Are we equivocating the use of blackface at a point in time or how it's done? We had former state representative and Deputy Secretary of State Ray Rickman on here giving his big view just a few weeks ago, saying blackface is never acceptable. So how does this get nuanced in such a manner?
Ray Rickman's right. Blackface is never acceptable, and it was certainly not acceptable in 1984. I think what people are having a hard time coming to terms with is to what extent a representative or a governor's behavior in the past should cripple them moving forward and should be an albatross around their neck forever. Now, there are certain things, and I put blackface in the category, that fall into that category. Like, I just don't think that it's ever okay. But I do think that if an elected official can demonstrate that they're not that person anymore, that they've grown and that they fully understand what they did, not in a time of political crisis, but in a time where they're able to show real leadership, maybe they can get around that. So when Ralph Northam spoke when he was lieutenant governor about the events in Charlottesville in the summer of 2017, if he would have said, look, I'm not proud of what I did when I was when I was 25 graduating from medical school, and I've grown as a person, and that's why I feel positive and I feel hopeful for this state, because despite what we just went through, people can change if they're taught what they need to do. I think the whole thing would have been received very, very differently. It's a lot different when people come out and admit to bad behavior because they're stuck between a rock and a hard place, and basically the politics of the situation mandate an apology.
So let's talk a little bit about political futures, and we'll tack outside of Virginia, kind of Northeast and national as well. Almost overshadowing the State of the Union yesterday was the revelation of Elizabeth Warren for the the application to the Texas bar, putting down her race as American Indian. Now, this, of course, comes on the heels of her taking the DNA test. How damning is this for the senator?
It's not good. And it's not good for a couple of reasons. The first is she's now in a position where she's had to say that didn't get her anything, right? So that she never benefited from that type of racial identification, because otherwise that would speak to sort of, an unfair advantage that people might perceive she had based on race. But second, one of the things that people really liked about Elizabeth Warren was that she was quite authentic, and she was a little bit policy wonky, and she told people what they wanted, not necessarily what they wanted to hear, but what she thought they needed to know, especially when it came to issues like income inequality or federal regulations of banks or other economic issues. And now she's basically in a place where she has to reestablish that she's authentic and credible and that people can trust her. And that's not where you want to be when you're kicking off a campaign and you're amid other candidates that don't have that authenticity problem.
She did, I believe, release several weeks back, but in the recent past, a video of her. Did you see this one of her drinking the beer, trying to appear, as you said, authentic as well? That seemed to have backfired in the national press.
And honestly, this is something that all candidates do, and it's just so silly. We can think about when Barack Obama went bowling. He bowled like a 27. No one thought Barack Obama was a bowler. When Hillary Clinton went to a bar and took a whiskey shot, but instead of taking the shot, she sort of sipped politely from a shot glass. These are terrible ways for candidates to suggest that they're real, right? Do what you actually really do in life, and you'll come across as authentic.
So it's funny that somehow State of the Union got put down now to third on our list, but there's just been obviously so much politically, nationally. But let's talk a little bit about that. Between female members in their white last night, between the president's proposal to really tackle HIV in the country. I mean, let's just go for blanket response when you heard the president's speech last night, and then we'll go from there.
So I thought the speech was bipolar. And I think that's the only way to explain it, because There, for every olive branch that was extended, or for every mention of unity or the idea of moving forward, there was a dig at the Democrats, or there was mention of a policy that the Democrats would just find completely antithetical to anything that they supported or believed in. And because the delivery was pretty flat, there wasn't really pivoting between these. It was just sort of pluses and minuses on a long laundry list. So it just seemed very, very scattered. It seemed all over the place. There was no thesis statement. That's what I would have told my students. Like, what is the point? And, as a result, I think neither side was happy with what they heard. The one part of the speech that was ad-libbed policy-wise made the Republicans pretty mad when Donald Trump, sort of in his typical hyperbolic fashion, said that he wanted more legal immigration than we've ever had. That's not what the Republicans want, and that's certainly not what the White House wants. The only other ad lib that I actually thought was quite effective and made him a little bit likable and somewhat authentic was after they sang Happy Birthday, and he said, they wouldn't have done that for me. So at least there was general self-awareness that a large portion of people sitting in the audience really couldn't stand him.
And let's talk that piece of the policy piece there, again, addressing a very important issue, obviously, of tackling HIV around the country. It was leaked prior to the speech. Folks knew it was coming. But I have not heard this out of the Trump administration until yesterday.
Yeah, it's unclear why that was in there or why it became a major priority all of a sudden. We don't know.
So let's talk a little bit about the response between Stacey Abrams and, of course, Bernie Sanders, who some are saying the latter might have taken a little bit of the thunder away.
Yeah, so as far as Stacey Abrams is concerned, let me just say that I think she did a fantastic job. Now, the bar is low because this is a terrible position for anybody to be in, but she really seemed to hit all of the right notes. And talk about authentic. It's hard to imagine somebody who can communicate with an audience in this very strange format in more real a way than she did. She was hard-hitting, but completely respectful and quite pleasant in her delivery. And, I just think she's the rising star in the face of the party. Bernie Sanders I'm not really sure what he's trying to do. He obviously still wants to be relevant. He is obviously still considering running for president. But, the ironic thing here is that he stole her thunder. He tried to steal her thunder. But part of the reason that he's becoming irrelevant is because he was so effective in 2016 that a lot of what he stood for, the Democratic Party and Democratic candidates absorbed and are now advocating. And so you don't necessarily need Bernie Sanders as the mouthpiece anymore. The party has moved in that direction. And so, I just think it's unfortunate that he wasn't able to let Stacey Abrams fully embody that position and represent the party.
So here we are. It's only Wednesday. It's been a full political week, and we're only halfway through. What are we keeping an eye on moving forward?
Well, the Mueller investigation continues, as do congressional investigations. The House committees have launched a whole series of very, very detailed financial investigations. Donald Trump obviously made clear last night during the State of the Union address that he thinks that those kinds of petty partisan investigations are actually what's going to keep the United States from maintaining peace. But there's no question that Congress, under the Democrats, is going to take its investigatory authority and its, congressional watch authority much more seriously. And as far as the Mueller investigation more broadly is concerned, there's nothing to suggest that things are slowing down. And so over the course of the next few weeks, my assumption is that we'll continue to learn more.
Well, as always, appreciate your taking the time to Skype in from the political hotbed of the United States, currently Virginia. Jennifer Lawless down at the University of Virginia, thank you again for taking the time.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to let Jennifer Lawless go, and we'll be right back here with our next guest in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Kate Nagel. Thanks for tuning in this Wednesday afternoon news and politics show. And speaking of politics and policy, we have a returning guest, Dustin Gauker with Play USA, to talk a little bit about the national look at sports betting and here in Rhode Island. Dustin, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me again.
Well, appreciate having you back. And just again, introduce yourself to those viewers who might not have seen and explain a little bit about your role with Play USA.
So we do a lot of online gambling, sports betting analysis across the United States. Obviously, last year, sports betting has opened up in a lot of states. So we track that and then legislation and everywhere that it's legalized. So track the industry, regulation, and legislation.
So we're still basking in the glow here of another New England Patriots Super Bowl. How was Super Bowl weekend for the sports betting industry?
That was good. This is the first time that Americans could legally bet on the game outside of Nevada. Before, you had to go to the only state where it was actually legal to do so, go to Las Vegas, and that's driven a lot of revenue and a lot of visitation over the years. So now we have, I think it's 8 more states right now that took wagers on the game. There was a pretty big turnout in Nevada, not as big as last year, but it was still about 140 million in wagers placed. And then the second biggest was New Jersey, where it was just under 40 million in wagers placed. So first go around for a lot of other states, smaller numbers in other states, but just it's a kind of a teaser to what lies in the future for sports betting for those states that have legalized it and that will legalize it in the future.
Let's talk a little bit about that. Is Las Vegas feeling the heat, if you will, of people not necessarily having to all gravitate there?
I don't think so. I mean, even though the total number of wagers went down this year, I don't think anybody's thinking that it's less of a destination. Actually, the numbers kind of bear out the opposite, that people are specifically going to Nevada for the Super Bowl and to bet on it and to watch it and things like that. New Jersey, as a percentage of all wagers for the month, it's going to be much smaller than Nevada, so we think it's going to be that state in particular and some others will be a little less event-driven, and I think people will still flock to Nevada and the sports books there in the future. And you guys had some pretty good handle there in Rhode Island, but I think that might have to do with, like you said, the Patriots win.
Yeah, of course, New England is Patriots country, because I want to talk now a little bit more specifically about Rhode Island. Late getting out of the gate, getting sports betting implemented and underway. The effective date ended up being months after the legislation that had enabled it to actually kick off. It started in November, and we've seen numbers that are below what was in the budget for expectations. They'd had $23.5 million budgeted. Now that's looking more like they downgraded that to 11.5. And even the most recent numbers aren't hitting that monthly level. Now, again, this is, month by month. What can we attribute this to? Why is Rhode Island not meeting these expectations so far here with sports betting?
Well, that $23 million number that you cited, I think that was with if they launched pretty quickly. That didn't happen, like you said. I think it was also a little optimistic, no matter what. Obviously, it's just the 2 locations for sports betting in Rhode Island and no mobile betting. So I think I think early days it's going to be you're going to be waiting for the real revenue hit. And I think I know the states already talked about looking at legislation this year to allow online and mobile betting. That would really expand who would bet. Like, obviously, some people will just come into the casinos and go to bet. But if you have remote registration where you can sign up for an app and do something like that, you'll see just way more betting, way more revenue. New Jersey, so far in its early days since launch, has something like 2/3 of wagering is via mobile. So that's a big deal, and I think Rhode Island would be smart to move that in that direction.
Well, there are currently hearings taking place this week on mobile, and as you just pointed out with New Jersey, again, everyone's on their phones, that is for sure. But again, with that late start with that 23.5 down to 11.5, should elected officials really be asking hard questions about those projections with mobile? Of course, as you said, the potential is there for increased usage, but how much do they need to boil down what that expectation is, given, again, that what we've seen here falls short so far with just regular in-casino sports betting?
Yeah, anything with sports betting, there's some excitement and it's new, but I think you have to give it some time to mature. The fact that not everybody may know that these casinos have sportsbooks. There's some amount of education that needs to go on, letting the market mature. People are also, there's some people who are used to betting, but this is a new activity for some people who want to bet on the game. So I think the Patriots game and the Super Bowl and all the excitement around that probably helped that effort a little bit. But I think you have to give it a little time. And again, I think if you're not thinking about or working toward legalizing mobile, I think you're going to have disappointing revenue numbers for a while.
Again, all eyes on this new facet, mobile sports betting. But let's talk about the regional picture as well. As we know, even with just regular casino gaming, we're seeing the proliferation of opportunities here in New England, up in Massachusetts. And similarly with sports betting, Massachusetts is, again, looking at sports betting now as well. How much should state officials be taking that into account? Again, if you have folks who might have been flocking to, say, Twin River because it's so close to the Massachusetts border, similarly Tiverton, abutting Massachusetts as well. If Massachusetts goes online, and let's talk about those examples with other states that might have abutters as well, should Rhode Island officials be really seriously taking that into account when they're putting forth their projections?
Yeah, I mean, if any of those surrounding states to you guys go live, then I think that definitely is going to hurt you. I think you probably had some amount of drive-in traffic just wanting to get money down on the Pats for sure. So Connecticut also going to really take a hard look at it this year. Massachusetts, I think at last count, had 7 bills, including one backed by Governor Baker. So yeah, if either of those states go live with sports betting, I think it's going to hurt those numbers were when Rhode Island had the market to themselves. If both Massachusetts and Connecticut go live, I think that's something else entirely then. And even New York is looking at sports betting too. They can have it at their upstate casinos. They might look at mobile again this year. So yeah, all of that has to come into the equation when you're looking at the potential revenue that the state can make.
So outside of Rhode Island, with your Play USA hat on as well, what are you keeping an eye on in 2019? Is it really that state-by-state, hand-to-hand combat, seeing who's going to be next to look at this revenue opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, we're tracking more than 20 states that have active legislation. We're tracking Pennsylvania, which has retail sports betting only, kind of like Rhode Island does, but is close to launching mobile betting. There's lots of other things. The professional sports leagues want their say. It's a big deal. The NBA, Major League Baseball have been lobbying at the state level for their asks in sports betting. And then the lotteries also. I know the lottery kind of oversees it there. And lotteries are looking to create products and have an online presence. A lot of states will be looking at that as a way to generate revenue via their lottery. So I think you'll see a lot more of that as well in 2019 and moving forward.
What do you think of the prospects of the big leagues who are already cash cows to begin with, really looking to get a piece of that pie? What does that potential look like? And as you said, again, is that on a state-by-state or could it be actually looked at a federal level?
Yeah, there's been a congressional bill introduced. I don't find it terribly likely it's going to get passed in the short term. The bigger ask is going around the states and asking for what they want, which is a lot of different things. They want, the most recent ask is they want 0.25% of all wagers to be paid to the leagues, either as a royalty or as an integrity fee. It's not something that any state has actually passed or legalized yet, but it appears in a lot of bills. And again, these leagues are high-powered, have a lot of money. They're going to be persuasive in their arguments. So New York is one place where they've been pretty persuasive. If they actually get it in the final bill, we don't know. But they're going to be heavily involved in it, as they should be. They're part of they're part of the sports betting ecosystem because people are betting on their games. So they'll have a say in how it goes down for sure.
So should we be keeping an eye on, say, NBA and NFL lobbyists here in the state as they could potentially be coming with their hands out? Because as you said, they've got the monopolies. The states, it's not in their inherent interest to just cough up over money. So again, is it that the power that they hold? I mean, what's the carrot they're dangling?
Yeah, I mean, in Rhode Island less so because you don't really have any,
you don't have a professional sports team
you
here.
have an entry point for. So, yeah, I don't know. You've already passed the bill there in Rhode Island, so I don't think they're going to come in and change anything there. I mean, in Boston, they have in Springfield, they have a little bit more pull because they have the franchises, and their owners will probably go and say, hey, listen to what our leagues have to say about this. So I don't think Rhode Island's going to be paying that royalty to anyone to the leagues anytime soon, but it'll be an argument that's had in a lot of states around the country.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to check in with us. We had you last year after the Supreme Court decision, and of course here after Super Bowl weekend, and seeing what's taking place up at the Rhode Island State House as they look at mobile sports betting now in the 2019 General Assembly session. So Dustin Gauker, thank you so much for taking the time to Skype in today. We certainly appreciate it.
Thanks, anytime.
Okay, thanks. We're going to let Dustin go here, and that just about wraps up another day downtown in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Be sure to check in with us tomorrow up at the Rhode Island State House, and of course back in studio with Chelsea Gay. But of course, in the meantime, check out GoLocalProv.com online, find us on Facebook, and have a very good Wednesday evening. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel.